Test 1 2. Test 1 2. Test 1 2. Hello. Test. Check check. Hi, everyone. Hope you're all well. If it's okay with you, I'm just going to give it one more minute just to allow anyone who might be slightly delayed the chance to come into the room before I start. So I'm just going to give it literally a minute to kick off. If you have any questions, queries, comments, please do put them into the chat, or for anyone who is joining us online by watching over YouTube, please feel free to throw any questions, etc., into the live chat, the YouTube channel. Okay, thanks everyone. So we'll start off in about 1 minute. Okay, so I think we can begin. Yeah, just so thanks very much everyone for coming along to the session today, for those of us joining in Zoom and also for those watching on the YouTube live stream. So if you're in Zoom and you have any questions, please feel free to put those questions into the chat area. If you are attending over um, by watching on YouTube, please feel free to put any questions into the YouTube live chat. So for the session today, it's really just going to be a real kind of whistle-stop tour of the main features that we think are worth knowing about for you in Canvas and in Zoom. So it's mainly going to be kind of focusing on Canvas, just focusing, I suppose, on getting into the system, setting up the system, adding content, communicating, creating assignments. And then in Zoom, I'm just going to briefly go through the process of setting up as scheduling a Zoom meeting, getting into Zoom, and then some of the main features really in terms of using Zoom. So I'm sure you're all fairly aware, but for any new staff who may be joining us, Canvas is basically MTU's virtual learning environment, which means it's kind of the system which can support digital learning, and all staff and students have access. They're automatically enrolled on relevant modules through MyBan. And the idea with Canvas really is it's kind of a hub in terms of digital learning. We've integrated all these different systems into it, like Zoom, but also anti-plagiarism systems, learning analytics systems, so on and so forth. And it's also available as a mobile app for staff and students. So this is kind of the digital learning ecosystem, and Canvas is kind of the hub in that everything is kind of plugged into it. So in terms of accessing Canvas, the way that we access Canvas is by going to cit.instructure.com. And then that will prompt you to sign in using, the standard MTU authentication process. So how I think of it is basically, it's the same details that I use to sign into my Outlook, into kind of my at mtu.ie mail, and you'll need to use the authenticator to get into Canvas as well. So in terms of accessing Canvas, once we're in Canvas, the first screen that we're going to see is the dashboard. So the dashboard is the kind of landing page, and this is where all of the modules, or at least the most relevant modules or selected modules that you're enrolled in, they will appear here. So within the system, there is a number of different navigation options. The main navigation for the entire kind of Canvas system is over on the left-hand side here. So you have your account where you can kind of, look at kind of information relating to your account. The main thing I would say there, like generally, you don't need to worry about it, but what I would say might be worth a look is notifications. So if you find you're getting a lot of emails from Canvas, just anytime anyone does anything in the system, what you can do if you go to notifications is you can decide, okay, if there is a announcement, then I want to see that straight away. If there is an invitation, I don't need to see that straight away. So I can just click on the icon here. That lets me decide, okay, give me a notification if there's an invitation. and give me that notification immediately at the end of the day, at the end of the week, or don't give me any notifications at all for this. So if you find you're getting a lot of emails from Canvas, it might just be worth going into account notifications and switching the relevant notifications to off. Otherwise, within the space, there is the modules option, which I'll talk about in a little bit. There is a Canvas calendar, which is essentially kind of a calendar in Canvas that you can use to see upcoming requests, issues, assignments, deadlines, so on and so forth. There's an inbox, which is a private communication system. I'm not going to go into that because there are messages from people in there. There is the history, which is essentially just kind of recent activity within the system. There's Commons, which is kind of an open kind of repository for sharing among staff or among other Canvas users. And there's also a help section. But the main thing that we're going to focus on is the dashboard. So as I mentioned, the modules which you are enrolled in Canvas will show up here on the dashboard. Now, this can be maybe a bit overwhelming at first because obviously with the start of semester, there will be a lot of modules which you are enrolled in, and they'll all show up here. And these will be divided in the dashboard into published modules, means modules that are visible to students, and unpublished modules, which are modules that you're enrolled in, but kind of they haven't been made, they're not visible to students until you go in as the instructor and publish the module. Now, as I said, this the enrollments in Canvas are derived from MyBan, and it might be the case that maybe you're enrolled in modules which you're not going to have a huge amount to do with, or even kind of you're enrolled in modules in MyBan which are not really relevant to you. So a very simple thing that you can do as a first step is this: you can decide which modules you want to show on your dashboard and which modules you don't want to show on your dashboard. And the way that we can do this is we can click on modules over in the main navigation menu. And at the top of that option there, we can see all modules. So if we click into this, what this will basically do is it will give us a list of all of the modules in Canvas which we are enrolled in. And those are divided into active modules, which is the kind of top half, and then past modules are modules from previous semesters. If I want a module to appear on my dashboard, so for example, I want the academic integrity training staff to appear on my dashboard, what I can do is I can simply click on the star icon here. And what that will do is it will basically tell the system, okay, show him this module that has been starred. Don't show him these modules which have not been starred. So I'll just untick a couple here just for demonstration purposes. And if we're happy with that, what we can do is we can simply go back to my dashboard, and you can see there that that has changed. So that has been entirely reduced down to the modules that I have added a star to. So if you find that there's a lot of modules coming up on your dashboard, an immediate thing which you can do to make life easier for yourself is simply click on modules, go into all modules, and identify only the modules that you want to see in your dashboard and add a star to them. Anything you don't want to see that is starred, just click to remove that star. And then when you go to your dashboard, only the modules which you've added a star to will be visible there. So that's an immediate way of just being able to essentially kind of tidy up the interface for yourself a little bit. In terms of accessing your modules then, very simply, to get into a module in Canvas, you can simply click into it. And this will bring you to what will be, if it's a new module for a new semester, it will be a blank module. So there won't be any content in here once you go into it. Now, the options in terms of the main navigation in Canvas is this menu here. The navigation within this particular module is this menu here. So for example, if I want to see the units for this module, I click into units. If I want to see the assignments for this module, I click into assignments, so on and so forth. If you want to, by default, all Canvas modules have this same kind of interface, just because we have what's called a blueprint template. So that basically means all modules in Canvas by default have this navigation set up. And the idea here is it's to hide kind of sensitive information from students, like, for example, people or rubrics or or anything like that. But what you can do, if you want to, is you can click into settings. If I decide, for example, well, I'm not going to use Zoom this semester, so I don't need to see it. I don't really want students to be using the discussion feature. You can click on settings, you can go into navigation, and basically anything that you don't want students to see, for example, Zoom, or we'll say syllabus, you can simply drag and drop this down to the lower area here. So I'll move syllabus and I'll move discussions down to this area here. And when I click on save, what that means is if you look over in the left-hand menu, that has hidden discussions and has hidden the syllabus. And you can see that they're hidden because they have this little icon next to them with the line or an eye with a line through it. So that's a way of making sure that students will only kind of see what you want them to see inside Canvas, inside your particular module. Certain items I might just mention, like units, are kind of they're not visible to students within a blank module, but they become visible as soon as we start adding content. So for things like units, things like assignments, it's not that they're hidden, it's just students won't see that option until we start adding some content, which we can do right now. So, um, what we can do to add content is we simply click into the units area. And from here, what we can do is we can click on create a new unit, or we can hit the blue plus unit button up here. So you can think about a unit as essentially a folder for content. So for example, uh, the way this process works is we would add a unit and then we would add relevant content under that unit. The same way you'd have a folder on your machine and you put, and you call it, for example, week one, and you add your week one files to that folder. So how you set up and structure your units is entirely up to yourself. Some people like to do it chronologically, week one, week two, week three. Some people like to do it according to subject matter. So this module is about instructional design. I might call the first unit, I don't know, cognitivism. I might have another unit for behaviorism, might have another unit for instructional design models. What I find easiest, to be honest, for everyone is to go week by week. So I'm going to call this unit week one, and I'm going to add the content for week one into this unit here. Now, the way in which we can add, once we have our unit created, the way that we can add content is we can simply, on this unit, click on the plus icon over here on the right-hand side. So if I click on the plus icon, that'll bring up a pop-up. And within this pop-up, I can select what I want to add to the week one unit from this drop-down. So I can add assignments, quizzes, files, so on and so forth. By far, I think what I use it for the most anyway is adding files. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select assignment, or excuse me, I'm going to select file. Any files that I've already uploaded to the course will appear in this space. But if I want to add a new file from my machine, I simply click on the create file option, the first option there, and that will bring up this pop-up down below. So just again, click create file, and that brings up this space down here. And from here, I can simply choose files. That will bring up the options of my machine. Click add item, and then that is in there now under week one. So you can simply repeat that process to add whatever you want to add under a particular week. And students can access that very simply by just clicking into it. So you can repeat that process to add whatever you want to under a particular unit. You can add assignments, quizzes, files, discussions, so on and so forth. How I tend to structure my own modules is I'll have week one, two, three, four, and then I'll also have a separate unit for, let's say, assignment one or assessment one, and another unit for assessment two. So really, the use of units is just a way of structuring your module so that it's kind of clear to students, and for me, it's clear to myself, uh, you know, what content belongs to what kind of area. So that's the process of kind of structuring your module according to units. But again, it's up to yourself really how you want to make this available. Now, another big feature in Canvas, which we already kind of briefly touched on, is the whole notion of publishing. So if we go back to the dashboard for a second, you can see here that we have published modules and unpublished modules. Published modules are modules that are basically visible to students. Unpublished modules even are modules which are not yet visible to students. A module will only become visible to students when you publish it. So if we go back into the module which we were just in and we go to the home page, you can see over here on the right-hand side, we have module status and it's set to unpublished. So the idea with the publishing process in Canvas is basically you can work away in the background, setting up your module however you want, adding units, content, whatever else. But you decide students only have access to it when you decide that they have access to it. So it's an important step in Canvas, and it's kind of something that maybe we tend to see a few tickets about every year, is that students are worried that I'm meant to be enrolled in this module, but I can't see it in Canvas. And more often than not, it's just because the module hasn't been published. So if I go into my module at the start of the semester, I go into the unit space, I set everything up how I want it to be set up. And then when I'm happy for students to have access to it, when I'm content that they can go into the module and start looking in there, I very simply go to the home page of the unit, I go over to the right-hand side and I change the state from unpublished to published. And you see there, once it's been published, you'll have the module status is published and it'll have that green tick to it. So that's publishing the module. In addition to publishing the module, Canvas also gives you control over if units are published or unpublished and files are published or unpublished. So it's a similar process. And really what you're looking out for here with publishing is that kind of green tick. If I go to week 1, I can see at the moment that is currently not published because it's got this icon through it. If I want to publish it for students, very simply click on that icon. I can decide to publish unit and all items, so everything that's under this unit, or I can just publish the unit only. I can also unpublish the unit and all the items in there. So, for example, at the moment, this is unpublished, this is published, the file is published. But what that means is because the unit is unpublished, it means it's going to be invisible to students. And a really useful tool for checking what students can and cannot see within Canvas. And this is kind of a good kind of safety check, I guess, in terms of if you want to make sure you have an idea of what students can see and not see, is the View a Student button up in the top right corner. So if I click on the View a Student button, what that will basically do is it will log me in as a student and I can see what the module looks like from a student perspective. So because the unit is unpublished, I can see that I can get into this space, but there's nothing in there. So if I leave the student view, that tells me, all right, this isn't unpublished. So I'm going to publish unit and all items, and just for the crack, we'll publish this one too. And if I click on view as student again, once we go in as a student this time, we can see that week 1 is available, this file is available, and this unit is also available. So the publishing features in Canvas, it sounds like kind of a small deal or a bit of an afterthought, but it's actually pretty important because if the module isn't published, students won't be able to see it on their dashboard. If the units or the files aren't published, students aren't going to be able to see them once they get into the module. And just a final mention in terms of publishing, another option which is available, we'll just create a unit called assessment 2. When you do create a unit, there's a couple of options available to you. So one thing which I can do, for example, is at the start of semester, I want to set up my module so everything is in there and I don't have to be worrying about adding to it over the course of the semester. So with that, I might say, okay, well, I have the second assessment. That's not really going to be relevant to students until the end of October. So what I can do is I can create the unit, but I can also click this lock until option. And what that will do is it will let me to set a date and a time. So we'll say end of October at 9 a.m. And if I click add unit, what that does is it adds this unit, but it also puts a timeline against it. So it means that students aren't going to be able to see that or access this until the 31st of October at 8:30. And again, if I just view a student really quick, we can see here, they get that message. This will unlock on the 31st of October at 8:30. And you can do the same thing as well if you want to with files and so on and so forth. But what I find easiest to do is I just set up the unit, I add all the files, and then I lock the unit. You can also do that if you want to by clicking on the right. If you have a unit set up, you can click on the edit option here using the little kind of menu on the right-hand side. And again, you can simply click lock until we'll say end of September. So that is a useful feature, I suppose, because what I like to do is I like to go in at the start of the semester. I like to add all of the files, all of the assignments, everything is in there. But if I don't want students to if I don't want to overload them, if I don't want stuff to become available to them until a particular date and time, I can lock the units so they'll only show up for students at particular times. One way in which I might do this or what I do myself, is I set up week 1, 2, 3, 4 up to 13. And then for week 2, I go, okay, well, I know that's going to be next week. So I'm going to lock it until let's say the Sunday, the 15th. Week 2, I'm going to lock it until the following week. Week 3, I'm going to lock it until the following week, so on and so forth. Now, it's entirely up to yourself how you'd like to approach this, but I find myself, it makes life a little bit easier for me if I set everything up at the start of the semester and assign particular units to become available at particular times. It just means I don't have to go in week to week and start adding additional files, so on and so forth. A final thing that I mentioned, excuse me, in terms of adding content to your unit is if this is a module that you've taught before and you have a Canvas module where you already have everything set up, like for example, the one from last academic year, what you can do is you can go into this option here on the dashboard for import existing content. So I'm just going to copy the module code from here real quick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click import existing content. From import content, what I can do is copy a Canvas module. I can search for the module. So I'm just going to paste the code, which was in here. And I am going to identify the iteration of this module from last year. So that is the e-learning instructional design module, term 2023-24 semester 1. What I can do then is I can decide if I want to pull in all the content or just some of the content. So all of the content is usually the easiest, but just for this purposes, I'll click select specific content and I'll click import. From here, what I can do is I can pick the content I want to pull in. So I am just going to pull in, just for the sake of argument, the first couple of units. Hit select content, and then that is queued up. So we'll come back to that in a few seconds. But the basic idea with this is that process, it's going to pull in the units that I set up in last year's version of this module. I find myself, I tend to use the same material year in, year out. So that is going to make the process of that ability to pull like a module that you already set up from last year, that you already added all the content to from last year. The ability to pull that in is just going to save me a lot of time and energy. In terms of creating assessments in Canvas, probably the most straightforward assessment tool that you're going to use is the assignment. So if we click into the assignments area over in the module on the left-hand side and click on plus assignment, what that will do is it will allow us to create an assignment. So I'll just call this test 1. The thing about assignments is basically that you can think of them as like virtual pigeonholes. Essentially, you create a space and students upload files to that space that you can then review, and from there give them marks, feedback, so on and so forth. So within an assignment, you can give the assignment a name. We'll call it assignment 1. You can give it a description here. And a useful feature here, which you can do is if you want to, there's a number of options here in terms of being able to add links and formatting, adding images, so on and so forth. Quite a useful feature here is the ability to click here on the documents item. And from here, I'm going to select the option to upload document. I can click in here to grab something from my machine. So what this is very useful for essentially is if you have the brief for a particular assessment in a Word format or in a PDF format, what I can do is I can simply grab it off the machine, add it in here. And what that does is basically it puts a link to that brief inside here for students. So I might say assignment 1, details, ... And then I might say, here is the brief. And then from a student perspective, they can simply open that up and look at the PDF within Canvas. For the assignment, you're going to be able to add points. To be honest, I find the most useful or straightforward way of thinking about the points is to simply add 100. You can always change the weighting of the assignment in question at a later date. Personally, I've just found that it's easier to mark out of 100 and then kind of figure out the weightings afterwards. Assignment groups, you don't have to worry about too much. If in the assignment tab you want to create a grouping, so for example, I might say group, I don't know, assessment one. If you want to, you can create additional kind of groupings and add particular assignments under those. That can kind of just help with the weighting if you want to. So, but for the most part, I think you can just leave it under assignments. I find it's easiest to display grades as points or as percentage, but again, that is up to yourselves. And then the submission type is an important element of an assignment. For the most part, and this is something I would use myself, I would recommend, or we would recommend, setting the submission type to online, and then under the online option, you have a number of options. By far, we found the most straightforward, the easiest for everybody is file uploads. If you just want students to give you a URL as part of this assessment, you can select website URL. If you want them to upload a video file or an audio file, you can do that. Text entry allows them to type directly into Canvas, but it doesn't allow them to save as part of that process. So that's just kind of inviting trouble for everyone. So file upload is generally the easiest and most straightforward approach that we have found. Um, Essentially, what you're asking students to do is create a Word document or a PDF document or a PowerPoint document or similar and upload that to this space, which you can then review. File uploads, to be honest, we've just found to be the easiest, most straightforward, and kind of safest option for everybody. Submission attempts means how many times students can upload against this particular assessment. Generally, we would recommend that what I always do is I simply leave it as unlimited. If you want to, you can set it to limited. So for example, they're only allowed to upload one time. Again, if I set this as limited and a student accidentally uploads the wrong file, what that means is they're then going to have to get onto me over email. They're going to have to send that file to me that way. I'm going to have to upload it on their behalf, so on and so forth. So by far the easiest and most safest option, again, for everyone is to just set that as unlimited. And if a student uploads the wrong file, they can simply come back in and upload the right one at a later date. Now, it's a new feature and we'll be providing training on it over the next kind of 2 weeks, is the plagiarism review. So the plagiarism review option will appear if I select file upload or I select text entry. It doesn't really count for website URL or media recording or student annotation. So if I select file upload, that will bring up this plagiarism review option. And what we are strongly recommending is at the moment we are going to replace original, which was the older, worser plagiarism detection system, with Turnitin. So if I do want Turnitin to review what students upload against for potential plagiarism, I can select the Turnitin option here. Now, like I said, I'm not going to spend time on this because we will be covering it in additional training over the next 2 weeks. For the most part, if you want to, like generally the standard kind of default settings that are here are fine. But like I said, I'm not going to spend too long on it because we'll be doing more training on it over the next 2 weeks. So we'll come back to that at a later date. Assign access then is important just in terms of being able to determine the deadline, who can submit against it, so on and so forth. So assign to by default will be set to everyone. All this means is that every student who is enrolled in this module will be required or can submit against this assignment. The due date then is the deadline for submitting against this assignment. So for example, I might say, okay, the deadline for this first assessment is the end of October. So I can put in that date and then I can set a time. By default, it's always going to set it, Canvas will always set this as a minute to midnight. So it means they have the entire day of the 31st to upload against it. Now, the thing about the due date is that's the deadline. Students can obviously submit after this deadline. It just means that Canvas will give you a heads up that, hey, this student submitted late, or this student submitted after the deadline you set. Available from and until then basically hides this assignment, excuse me, basically hides this assignment from students until after the available from date and up until the until date. So if these are blank, it's going to be visible to students right away. If I add in, for example, this Friday, so available from and then until the 7th of November, what that means is this assignment is going to be visible to students until after this time, and after the 7th of November, it's going to disappear, become invisible again. Generally, we would strongly recommend that you basically leave these blank for the simple reason that it is confusing to students if assignments are appearing and disappearing out of the space. The due date is kind of an essential feature because that's the deadline by which they should submit. But generally, we would recommend leaving these kind of blank, or if you want to, or at a minimum, I might say, all right, well, if this is the second assignment, I don't want to overload them at the start, so only show this to them, midway through October. A feature which is available as well is because this is assigned to everyone, this is the deadline which is there for everyone. If I want to, I can set a different deadline for different kind of students or different groups. The way I can do that is I can click assign to down at the bottom, and I can assign to a specific student. So I might say, okay, well, this is for the deadline for everyone, but I know a certain student might have kind of a need a bit of an extension. In which case, I can click just to go through that process. I can click on assign to at the bottom. I can select a specific student or group of students, and I can set a different deadline for them. So I can set this deadline for the example, 14th of November instead of the 31st of October. And if I hit save and publish at the bottom, then what that does is it basically provides the details. I can see here the due date for everyone is the 31st of October. The due date for one student is the 14th of November. And again, good habit to get into is very simply to click view a student and then see what it's like from a student perspective. We can also test that process out by clicking start assignment. And in student view, you can basically upload the file as a student to see what it's like for them. Because we've added the Turnitin view, just a small FYI for yourselves, they are required to tick this box as well and hit submit assignment, and then that's the student work submitted. And sorry, I should have mentioned you can access student view by clicking on the view student view button. You leave student view by using this button, the bottom right corner. Once a student has submitted an assignment up into Canvas, you can review what they have done by clicking on the option here for Speed Grader. So Speed Grader is Canvas's kind of feedback tool, basically. It's a way of allowing you to provide grades and also feedback to students. So what we can do is within SpeedGrader, you can move through the different student submissions using the kind of drop down up in the top right, or by clicking the left and the right arrows. You can see what the student submitted over on the left-hand side here. And you can see the options for adding grades and commentary and so on and so forth over in the right-hand column here. So we'll have a whole other section on providing feedback to students, but very simply, a lot of the tools up here are very useful for providing specific feedback. So if I just click on this annotation tool and click here, I might say use a different font for the header. So you can add different kind of specific commentary here. You can add general feedback here. So I might say something like overall, very good work, watch out for ... And then when I'm happy with that, I can give the student a particular grade under the assessment area here. Now, just to briefly mention, when you begin adding feedback or when you begin adding grades to student work, by default, it will hide that from students. So if you want, the idea with this basically is that what you can do is you can add, once all students have submitted, you can add grades and feedback to their work in SpeedGrader, but students won't see their feedback and their grades until you're happy to make it available to them. So it's kind of like publishing. It's kind of like another form of the whole publishing thing. What that will do is basically, if I'm happy with the feedback and marks that I've given them, I can hit submit. I can move on to the next student using the option up here. But when I'm happy with all of the marks and feedback that I've given to all the students, what I can do is I can go up to the top left corner here. And again, if you see that kind of familiar eye with the line icon, like in the navigation menu, excuse me, what I can do is I can simply click on this and I can hit post grades, and that will make the grades and the feedback available to all of the students inside in this module. We just go back to the home section for a bit and scroll down the page a bit, you can see that the content I imported previously from last year's version of this module is all in there. So if you do have a module that you taught last year, you can basically copy in the module content or import the module content as a way of saving yourself a lot of hassle. The final thing that I'm going to mention then is Zoom. So Zoom is MTU's kind of online delivery tool of choice. The way in which you can schedule a Zoom session for students, so to schedule an online session for students, is very simply to click into the Zoom item, which is enabled by default in each module. And from here, you can see any upcoming meetings that you have, any previous meetings that you have, and recordings of same. So if I decide that I want to do, let's say, an online induction session for students at the start of this semester, what I can do is I can click into Zoom, and then I simply click on this schedule a new meeting button over on the right-hand side here. So if I click on that, what that will do is it will allow me to create a Zoom meeting that is going to be visible and accessible to all of the students in this module. So we'll say, this is the topic. We can enter a description here. So I might say induction session. I can decide when it's going to happen. So it's going to happen, let's say, next Wednesday at 12. It's going to last an hour. The time zone is going to be straightforward. We would recommend leaving registration alone, and you can leave security alone as well. By default, these options are going to be ticked inside in Zoom, which essentially means that there is going to be a waiting room. So, students can't just come into the session. You have to allow them in the Zoom space. And you can also determine if what type of authenticated users can join meetings. Generally, it should be only MTU Cork use for students. But if there is any difficulties, if students maybe don't have their official student accounts yet, you can set it to sign into Zoom. And what that means is they have to sign into Zoom, maybe using a personal account or similar, if they want to be able to join the session. When you're happy with all of that, what you can do is you can simply, and again, you don't have to worry about all of these options. You can really just leave those as default. Although if you want to record the session, it's no harm to click that option. But when you're done with that, you can click save. And then within the Zoom space, then we can see that this meeting has been lined up for this date, for this time. Here's the meeting ID. When you're ready to begin, you can simply click start and that will launch the Zoom session. Now I can't launch it from within here because that would end the current Zoom session that we're all in. Excuse me. So, but the process of setting up a Zoom session that all students can attend, um, and just the fact that they know where the link for the Zoom session is in the Canvas module is a really, really useful feature. So the other thing in terms of Zoom is all staff. If you're having any difficulties with Canvas, you want to set up a Zoom session, let's say outside your Canvas module, what you can do is go to telcit.zoom.us. And if you click the sign in option there, that will ask you to log in using the same kind of process as your mail, as Canvas using the kind of official MTU authentication. I can't go into too much detail about the Zoom interface because obviously we're all in Zoom and I can't kind of show you the Zoom interface while we're in Zoom. But we do, if you go to telhelp.eu.helpdocsite.com, we have a number of articles there that will show you kind of how to get set up on Zoom and how to use the Zoom interface for online sessions with students. The final thing that I'm going to mention then is just in terms of supports. inside in Canvas, there is tier one 24/7 support. So what essentially this is it means there will be a Canvas support agent available 24/7 to talk to you if you do have any difficulties inside in the system. And the way that you can access this is over in the main navigation menu. What you can do is you can click on the help option. And the option that we would strongly recommend is web chat with Canvas support. And what that will do is if you click on that, it'll ask you for a couple of details just in terms of your name, your email, the kind of problem you're having, how severe the problem is. So for example, you would be selecting faculty and, you know, I can't get things done until I hear back from you. And once you hit the button at the bottom of that screen, it will send you into a kind of a live chat session with a Canvas support agent. So we really would recommend that being the first port of call because they're always available. The Canvas support agents obviously know the system inside out and they would be able to help you with any issues that you're having. So we really would strongly recommend live web chat as the best and most immediate way of getting help with anything that you need. Obviously, then there's certain issues that are kind of maybe that affect Canvas but aren't directly to do with Canvas. So, for example, if you're not enrolled in a module you should be, if you're having difficulty accessing your MTU account, that's not really something which Canvas support agents can help you with. So, for any MTU specific issues like you're not enrolled in the module you should be, you don't seem to be able to get into your MTU account, you can message IT service support at servicedesk@mtu.ie. So you can email that to get a hand for things like that. Then if there's more TEL specific issues, so things, for example, like cross-listing, or you're having some technical difficulty with Zoom, you can email us in the TEL team by emailing edtech@mtu.ie. So anything at all to do with Canvas, we would recommend tier one as the first port of call. But obviously, if it relates to internal MTU stuff, there is service desk for IT, MTU account related issues. And then for things like cross-listing or kind of TEL supports, there's EdTech at MTU. We also have the department website at tel.cit.ie and student guidelines and a YouTube channel and staff guidelines. Generally, if you go to our website at tel.cit.ie, demonstrate very briefly, we have a whole host of resources inside on that website which are designed to be of help to you. In particular, if you go to staff resources, there's a lot of options in our help doc articles. So that's essentially just this big knowledge base where you can look for help articles on any issues you're having to do with Canvas, to do with Zoom, to do with any of the other tools we offer. There is also our YouTube channel where we have recordings of prior training sessions. So generally, that is it. I appreciate that is a very, very quick kind of whistle stop tour of Canvas and Zoom, but those are really, I think, the main features and functions to know about in terms of getting up and started for the semester. So if anybody has any questions, I'd encourage you to throw them into the chat area if you're in Zoom or if you're joining us in YouTube, to put them into the YouTube live chat. If you don't have any questions, maybe you might just give me a no in the chat area, just so I'm not, just to let me know that that's relatively clear. But as I said, if you do have any questions, anything at all, please do feel free to throw them into the chat, and I'm happy to answer them now. Otherwise, if you don't have any questions, just to say thanks so much for coming along to the session. And as I said, we'll be continuing to offer training on all the various elements over the next while. So please do feel free to kind of work away with those as required. Okay, so if there is nothing coming into the chat area, then uh sorry, apologies everyone. So yeah, Anne Marie has kindly told me that the chat is disabled. Apologies for that. So yeah, if you want to put it into the Q&A area instead, then please feel free to do that if you have any questions. Okay, if there's no questions coming in, then just to say thanks so much, everyone, for coming along to the session, and I hope it was of some use. And yeah, we will make the video available afterwards on our YouTube channel. So we'll be sending out kind of information and updates around that. But generally, if you go to our website, you can click on staff resources, click on our YouTube channel, and any and all of the videos that we have done over this semester and over previous semesters will be available in there under videos. So that's it. Otherwise, thanks so much everyone for coming along to the session. I hope it was of some use, and apologies, I went a bit longer than I should have, but I just or than I meant to, but I just wanted to try and clear or provide as much kind of guidelines as I could for the coming semester. As I said, we'll be continuing the training over the next while, so hope to see you at one of those at a later date. But thanks so much for your time, and I hope the start of semester goes well for everyone. So thanks very much, everyone, and take care.